Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy.
Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the subject of male leadership. I'm having a small audio problem. Just a moment. Okay. Got to turn off echo cancellation. It was not canceling the echo. It was creating it. So what I'm doing today is talking with Western Renaissance about the very important topic of male leadership in society. We live in a society that is slowly crumbling, largely due to the fact that mature masculine men are focusing so much on their own private lives that they're doing very little to reach out and stabilize the commons, stabilize society and culture. And this is in part due to the fact that we've allowed ourselves to be shamed into silence, shamed into backing off from our traditional role as the stabilizers of society. And we're going to talk today about some of the solutions for that and also what's happening around the world with male leadership. Welcome, Western.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And it's you're right up on the other side of the world, as people will guess by your accent. So you're down there in Australia. And it's really a great example of a country that's lacking in male leadership right now. Your government is acting like a frantic mother who just found out that some uncontrollable disaster is about to befall her family, and she's panicking. And it's really extremely obvious to men that the response, and this is almost the entire Anglosphere has been doing this, the response is an extremely feminine, panicked response versus the typical problem-solving, cold, cool, rational male response to emergencies and danger. What do you think about that?
The first thing I'll say is I think I'm getting some pretty full-on echo. Is there any way we can take care of that?
Yeah. Let's see.
I'm getting a delay in what I say.
Okay.
I could deal with it if it's not
How about
going
now? Okay, I will mute myself when I'm not talking.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Great. So I completely agree. Could you repeat the question, because my train of thought was lost? I had something there.
Yeah, no problem.
The echo put me off.
The response that we're seeing across the Anglosphere, with Australia perhaps being the most extreme example, is the feminine panicked response versus what we need, which is the calm masculine problem-solving response to emergencies and danger that we're seeing as the COVID response. And I was wanting to get your opinion on that and on why society is responding like a woman in danger rather than a man facing threats and opportunities.
Well, of course, but this has been decades in the making. I did a video saying the new religion, and it's a play on words because it is a continuation of religion in a lot of ways, and also a new religion, but it's just really the primacy of feminine values. And even in my country, we have this saying, we live in the nanny state, and we do, it's being governed by feminine neuroticism. and what I'll say too, I posted something on Twitter. This is what I wanted to say, and I forgot. I posted on Twitter. There's, just to give some context, there's a government body in this country called Fair Work. And so they are like a para-government body that's supposed to ensure fair working conditions for workers. So their deputy premier or president, but anyway, the second in charge of this big government body has come out really denouncing this idea that people are going to be fired if they don't take the current medication. And the response to that was that she was stood down and is allowed to resume her position after she has undertaken mandatory training, which is just a euphemism for mandatory re-education. And I think it's very funny that, well, very telling that the ideology that we have in power now don't see a difference of opinion as a difference in opinion between sovereign individuals that needs to be negotiated or traded with other individuals. It sees descent that needs to be re-educated. And this is very much like the feminine herd, the mother and the naughty children. You're bad, you need to be re-educated by the state. And so, like I say, this is decades in the making. My personal experience of this, my head is filled with so many of these examples which confirm what I'm saying. I had an example, someone the other day was talking about relationship issues, and I just very casually mentioned, oh yeah, like with my wife, we had an issue, something like that, but I set a boundary. I basically said, look, this is mine and that's why, and I do that because I'm good at that, and that's yours and you do that, and let's both do what we're good at. And I was explaining to someone, but in that group of people, an older boomer male was, referring to his wife, saying, oh, I wouldn't dare. I'm like, you wouldn't dare what? Set a boundary, a healthy boundary with your wife? But this is, once again, this is decades in the making. The young men defer to women because they've been told, media and Hollywood and culture and every portal for discussion of male-female relationships has been saturated with this idea that you get with women if you make them happy and you defer to them and they're great and you're shit, and white males are the devil and all that sort of stuff. So the young men are deferring to women to gain their favor, and this probably started with the boomers. And so a lot of the boomers are weak, and you see that as well. A lot of these boomer men are unhappy, even if they run very expensive companies. And this is one thing that ties in what we're talking about. I know a lot of very wealthy boomers who have a lot of money, who have a lot of capacity and pull, or could have a lot of capacity to influence our society, but they don't. They will boss other young men around. They'll run big organizations. They probably even have multiple properties and a boat, yet they'll go home to a wife who treats them like shit because they're weak.
Yeah, absolutely. And before the boomer generation, couplings were, and marriage, all that kind of stuff was quite regulated. And what happened is that you didn't have much sex before marriage. It happened, but it wasn't the norm. And then with the boomers, the sexual liberation movement happened around the same time that they were, coming of age. And so all of a sudden, instead of being a man, taking a stand, being strong, creating your own network, impressing the fathers of women you might want to marry, instead of that being what was important in order to get a woman, it was say anything, do anything, prostrate yourself, whatever it is, as long as you can get your dick wet, you've succeeded. And that trained them from that early age to do whatever they can to get the female approval. And then their sons grew up seeing that.
Now, that's 60 years of this. That's 60 years of this. And so, I talked to a boomer male about saying, I had this issue with my wife, and we set some boundaries over what she's good at, what I'm good at, and what's mine and what's hers, and how it works that's productive and efficient. And he's like, I wouldn't dare. But that's just an example of what is so common. It is everywhere. And excuse the crass language, but I'm pretty sure it's technically called the sneaky fucker. And it's where different males have different strategies. Like guys like us, we try and increase our man points, so to speak. Like, let's make money, let's be and take leadership, let's try and be strong physically, mentally, spiritually, all these things, provide leadership. But the sneaky fucker is the male underminer who goes, oh, all those guys, they're all bad guys, because he can't compete with benevolent male dominance and leadership. So he says, oh, that's oppression, that they're oppressing you. And that's where you get the beta male complaining about all the women who just date these douchebags, because he's undermining their masculinity because he can't compete. And so he says, come and sleep with me, I'm the nice guy. Now, if you still had strong, once again, it's all just compounds on each other, because if you had strong fathers, I always say to people, I've said this to my wife a lot, women can pick women's dysfunction and men can pick men's dysfunction. And so often the way men's strategies are blind to women are blind to men's strategies, and men can be blind to women's strategies. So
Yeah,
she said to me,
if we could see the opposite sex's strategies carefully, they would be terrible strategies. They wouldn't work.
exactly.
The whole point is that it is a competition. People call it the war of the sexes. I don't think it's a war. It's a competition.
Yeah,
It's a competition for power and control.
yeah. Which, if it's done reciprocally, it leads to maximizing evolutionary computation.
Yeah.
Which is another way of saying it's a healthy competition that makes things better, ideally. But once again, so if you had strong father figures, he'd be able to say, yeah, there's something about this guy who's undermining all the other boys that I don't really like. But women, once again, they're left on their own. And the thing about the sneaky fucker thing, the undermining beta male, is it actually works. It really does work. A lot of women will be like, yeah, I got this nice guy, but what happens is it works short term. Maybe a woman dates a whole bunch of guys who are not benevolently masculine. They can be malevolently masculine or in other ways dysfunctional. And then they say, well, I'm just going to get this nice guy. He treats me really well. And she might be, getting close to 30 and wanting to have some kids, but then say, well, he's lovely to me. But then what happens is after she gets what she wants in terms of having a family or maybe that beta provider, it tapers off. And another thing I've seen is women after the kids leave home say, why do I even need a man? What good are you? Because at the end of the day, she's a better man than he is.
Well, and that sneaky fucker strategy. I'm sorry, people, if you don't like the swearing, but that's actually the scientific term for it.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody added that in just so that they could, have a term that would catch attention. But that strategy is designed for hit it and quit it moves. It's get in, get out.
Yeah.
But we don't tend to do that as humans. That doesn't tend to be our mating strategy generally. So when you take that hit and leave strategy, hit and run strategy, and then you try to make a relationship out of it, this is why it can't last. She quickly uncovers that nice guys aren't good guys. They usually are worse even than the malevolent masculine guys, because at least the malevolent masculine guys have value, and you can sometimes win them over, so they're only malevolent to other people and not you. But the guy who is nice, he's deceptive, and he will always be deceptive because that's who he is.
Yeah. Because he's not honest, because he has that lack of power. I've seen that a lot.
That is that whole sneaky strategy is about being dishonest. Even in the animal kingdom, it's about subdiffusion. It's about appearing to be not a threat. And in the animal kingdom, a lot of the ones pursuing that sneaky strategy, actually it ends up being rape that they use to consummate the relationship, and not consensual sex, because what they're looking for is women who are not protected by a strong male. And so we see today, like a woman who has a strong father is very unlikely to tolerate a nice guy. She won't put up with it. She may not understand exactly what he's doing, but in her gut, she senses there's something wrong with this man's approach. He's not being honest. Now, I've had a lot of women tell me that I get this creepy feeling from this guy, or I get this kind of sickness in my stomach when he touches me. And I said, this is your gut telling you something really important. He's in some way, he's being dishonest. And if he's being dishonest, your job isn't to figure out where. Your job is to leave, get away from him. And it's very, very effective for women. That's that feminine instinct that we hear so much about.
I did this thing when I first was dating my wife, and luckily it turned out to be a complete nothing burger. But my accountant made a mistake with a study debt, and I thought I had debt. It turned out I didn't at all. But it turned out she said, "Oh, you actually owe this tens of thousands of dollars in study debt." And I'm like, I don't know where that came from. Like, inflation on this thing must have been crazy, but it was all a mistake anyway. But I'd only been dating my wife for a couple of months at that point, and we're talking about money. We've always talked frankly about what the mission is, what the goal is long term. And I said, look, I've just actually found out I've got this debt, but because that's what I said to her. Look, I appreciate honesty. The one thing I hate is being lied to, and what I see what I wanted to do is basically say, this is who I am. This is my deck of cards. Just going to lay them all face up. That's open book. You can decide what's right for you. But that's because I had full confidence that she would choose me and be happy. And she did. And it all turned out to be a nothing burger anyway. But once again, that honesty, because you have confidence of your value anyway.
Yeah, a lot of people, they don't get how seriously honorable men take lying, like how much of a negative it is. And what I say to people is that there are two principal ways of aggression. One is through violence, physical violence, attacking someone, and the other is through lies and manipulation. Both of those are forms of aggression. They're tools of war. And it's fine to use a tool of war to defend yourself against someone who's using a tool of war against you, if you're in an actual situation where that's necessary. But if that's part of your intimate relationships, then they're very, very sick. If violence and manipulation and lies are part of your intimate relationship, you have a problem. And so men react as, and women as well, we react as with the same level of revulsion to being lied to or to having someone try to manipulate us as we would to, say, seeing someone beat their wife. That same level of revulsion comes up when we hear lies. And because there's no physical damage left after a lie, a lot of people underestimate how serious it is. But almost all physical violence is the result of lies and manipulation that get out of hand and lead people towards being violent with each other. Very often, violence is resolvable without actually anyone getting hurt when everyone is being honest with each other. You can talk things out. You can come to an agreement because the cost of violence is so high, people want to avoid it. But we can't calculate that cost properly when we're living with all kinds of lies and manipulation. And so we end up making decisions which lead to more violence. And this is why men are so revolted by lying. And I think women, they don't always know what it is, but they also know that the lying, especially when they are dealing with men who lie, that's the prelude to the violence. So a lot of these nice guys, they don't just lie, they end up being violent as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's something Kurt said too, that like men are corrupt, but women are treacherous. And once again, you're talking about that direct versus indirect violence, but it's very hard these days because people don't see. Once again, it's just weaponization of feminine methods of warfare, but people don't see it. And one good thing about having a beautiful wife, a beautiful woman for a wife, is that you do hang around other very feminine women, and like you're kind of in the green zone, like you're married and you're cool, and you've got a beautiful wife, so you're cool around beautiful women, and you've got that social proof and all that stuff, and that's all great. But they talk to you very openly. When I found I have a very, I won't go off on a tangent, sorry, but what I found is that, you talk about women, listen to women talking about other women. And a story recently, one woman was complaining about another one, and she'd say, this girl used to bully me at work, and she just nitpick me and undermine and this and that. And then I'd get really angry. She'd essentially bait her into conflict. And then I'd overtly react, and then she could play the victim. And that's so common. It is such a common method of warfare, but people are blind to it.
Well, and men, we can't do that because we'll get punched in the face.
Exactly.
And oftentimes, even in modern times, if you do that and you get punched in the face, everyone around you is going to go, you deserved it. And there will be very little consequences or none to the person who was baited. And when women do this to so men don't have any practice either doing this or defending against it. Then you have women who grew up doing this to each other, practicing this skill of baiting each other. And then they face off against a man, and we have about as much chance. Your average man has about as much chance at defending himself from a woman baiting him as the woman has at defending herself from the man hitting him. So
very true.
There's that real imbalance in power. And I think for most men, this is what we talk about, how important it is to maintain frame. What is frame? It's your ability to maintain your control in the face of being baited by a woman. And it's not always done maliciously. Sometimes it's their reaction, their poorly trained reaction to stress. So they're in stress, they're in pain. They want everyone else to feel that pain. And so they start baiting people into it. They want to kind of, let you know they're hurting. And since women tend to be very indirect, they do it by, I can't be the bad guy in this situation. Let's make you the bad guy. And if you can keep frame and work, if you can keep frame and work through this, you're not going to have to put up with that forever. This is the kind of stuff that happens as relationships are settling in. Once she knows she can bring her problems to you and you're actually going to work them out, and you're not going to judge her and judge her as unworthy of your help. That's what I mean by judging. Then she's likely to do that, and you stop getting shit tests, and instead you just get appeals for help. But it really requires you to do. It's the same thing you have to do with children, though. My son will be indirect with me sometimes, and I'll say, no, just tell me the truth. Tell me what's actually the problem and actually happening. Okay, I didn't want to tell you because I'm afraid you'd get upset. I'm like, do I ever get upset? No, I guess not. And now he's 8. He's getting about to the point where he realizes he can just come to me with things. And he doesn't have to go in that rigmarole, but it's 8 years. It takes a while for kids to get comfortable to come with everything they have to their parents. And for women, it depends really on how they were raised. If they went to their parents with a problem and their parents yelled and screamed at them, they're going to start dealing everything with their parents will be dealt with in a very indirect way. Yeah. And they're going to do the exact same thing to you as a man. And your ability to maintain frame is incredibly important to help her get over that bad habit. Now, extrapolating that to a societal level, we need mature men to step up at a societal level and say, to deal with the freakouts that society is having, to be plain and honest and well-spoken and maintain their frame. And I think it's also important that it has to be masculine men. They have to have a masculine aesthetic because men are very visual, but their judgment comes largely of men comes from external things. They don't tend to, we hear a man's argument and we start to think about the rationality of the argument, and he can be an anon on the internet and we don't care. We just care about the rationality of the argument. Whereas women will say, yeah, but you're fat. Yeah, you're right, but you're fat, so I'm not going to listen to you.
Can I put that in another thing? Because I actually wrote some notes for this and it ties in perfectly with some of the notes. So for me, one of the most, I get a new concept in my head and then I just see it everywhere. At the moment, I'm just swimming in this empathetic versus systematic brain thing everywhere. But like the more autistic male system. So if you say, well, this guy's logic makes sense, but he's behind a screen and, he's some obese basement dwelling guy behind an avatar on a screen, it doesn't matter, because what he's saying, the logic you're hearing or the argument you're hearing is a construct. It's a system, and you're judging the system. You can recognize the system and you're judging that, logic is an internally coherent system, or it should be. But the other side of that is empathetic brains, the feminine empathetic brain. And the catch with that is that I don't know if there's, how can I say it? Well, let's say social consensus is a big part of that thought process. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure it necessarily is a thought process in what we would consider it more of an intuition process. So social consensus is a big part of their intuition process, which I would boil down to say, for people who are very empathetically minded, and this is very feminine men or extremely feminine women, their reality is more likely to be socially constructed. And so if you are sending all the wrong signals, if your signaling is wrong, they're not going to like you, and it won't matter what you say, because they're constructing an opinion of you based on your social signaling.
And since if you count women plus maybe a third of men think like that as well, that's the
Yeah, it's a
majority of the
lot.
population. In a
Yeah,
democracy, that's the voting bloc that decides elections.
yeah,
And so we end up with we end up with politicians that run the country based on what works for that voting bloc.
yeah.
You know, a lot
Well,
of times we think the politician has this idea. No, they've gone out and they've workshopped this with a bunch of people and decided this is what's going to be popular. They don't necessarily believe anything they say. All
no.
they believe in is power, and they'll
Hmm.
say the thing that gets them power.
Hmm.
And here's the reason why we need masculine men to step up to the plate, because they have social proof. They have
Mm.
successful businesses,
Hmm.
beautiful wives, healthy children. They have other good masculine men around them. We joke sometimes on Twitter about Chadistan, and what we really need in the West is men to start running their Chad parties, where you have a masculine, successful man. You have some younger men that he's mentored and he's got in as a team under him to organize things. And women need to look at that and go, that's success. I don't care what he says. First, I'm going to check if he's successful, and then I'm going to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah, because
And
ultimately they don't
that's
really care
the
what you
only
say.
way we'll win this back from the feminine mindset.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's because ultimately they don't really care. They just want to be taken care of.
Yes, yes,
They want-
and we have to. It's our job to convince them as women that they're going to be taken better care of by a masculine, patriarchal society than they will be by a chaotic, end of the world feminine society that keeps telling them that everything is in a panic.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
a lot of women are getting to that point now. I've noticed that the feminist backlash on Twitter when you say things on social media in general is reduced in the last, say, 6 months or so. I think women are starting to burn out from all of
They
this
are.
hyper emotionality and
Yeah.
lack of any man to then kind of stabilize that, or any masculine influence in society to stabilize it.
They definitely are. And Kurt, when I keep saying Kurt, I've just been listening to his chats every day, so I'm full of bullet points from like every day listening to him. But he's talking about the percentage of mental illness among liberals, which basically just means women, and a high percentage of women these days are mentally ill. And as soon as he said that, I'm not reading from studies. I'm just amateur hour philosophizing and putting together patterns from my life experience and information that I hear. But I think a good analogy is, you have a knee which works in one direction, and if you try and force it in the opposite direction or two directions at once, it's going to break. And as soon as he talked about the percentage of mental illness among modern Western women, I thought to myself, if I had to put my money on why that is the case, I would say it is because they are like a joint which is trying to bend in two opposite directions at once. They are caught between a rock and a hard place because they're being squeezed between two things that women have very strong instincts to do, which is be normal and feminine, be feminine, be conflict averse, be competition averse, be social, and be maternal and be nurturing, and all the normal evolved feminine virtues. They're caught between that rock, and the other thing they really have a strong intuition to do is do what society tells them to do. They are high in agreeableness, which basically means societal agreement, and being in step with what society is saying is very important to them, more so important than men, more important to women than it is to men. And so once again, we now have a society that's telling them to be men and to compete with men. And so like a joint trying to bend in two different directions at once, they have their natural feminine instincts, and then they also have a very strong instinct to do what society is telling them to do, and that instinct is telling them to do the opposite of these instincts. So they're being torn in two directions at once, and I don't think they're happy about it at all.
Yeah, and this is actually a root cause of anxiety in all people is when they have two non-compatible philosophies in their mind at once, and they haven't picked one and rejected the other.
Yeah.
You can understand two, you just can't hold two at the same level of importance. And in fact, modern neurobiology teaches us that the brain is a bunch of competing centers for attention. And it's supposed to be that way. If you're hungry and you're thirsty at the same time, you're probably going to drink a glass of water first, and then you're going to eat. That's generally how, thirst will win out because you die first from thirst. And the same thing, if you're cold and you're tired, you're first going to make sure that you're warm enough, and then you're going to go to sleep. So when we have a need and those needs are competing, we have to have a way to decide which need we're going to fill first. The problem with anxiety is when you have these two and they're relatively the same and they're extremely complex and you're not sure which one to do. And the thing is women have gotten to a point where they realize they can't make everyone happy, and they can't even make themselves happy most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're really stuck. And it's going to be a thankless job. It's going to be a hard job. But in order to have any kind of a civilization at all, men are going to have to reimpose the structures that we used to have, that our great-great-grandfathers had in society, which protected women from this kind of exposure to lies. Basically, half of these ideas are lies. And we have to protect them again from those lies, and also protect younger men who haven't yet evolved the ability to protect themselves, and children. And we're just not doing that right now.
Exactly. And, I do want to say that I know we are analyzing women here, but after thinking about these things for a lot of years, I have to say that at this point in time, it's not just about women and where they fall short or what they could do better. It's absolutely men as well. Because for every woman that seems to have beliefs that don't serve her happiness very well, I can be around other married couples and talk about weightlifting, and the amount of women that would say, "Oh no, my husband wouldn't be interested in that. He would never do that." I might just say, "Hey, maybe we got to take your husband's a bit down. Maybe we got to just send him to the gym with me." And they, "Oh no, he would never do such a thing," and disappointedly saying that. And so, unfortunately, all of society is funneling people into an evolutionary mismatch where we're fighting against evolved or created by God. I don't really care which frame you'd like to use, but our, very strong hardwired instincts. And at this point in time, I think it's men and it's women. Women not only are encouraged to be men a lot of the time, and I've seen it a lot, they don't have functional men, and so they pick up the slack themselves because that's the best they can do.
Yes, a lot of what's gone wrong with women not being as feminine is that is a natural reaction to women in the absence of men. And a lot of this is the result of the world wars as well. And when men were all gone in the world wars, women had to bridge the gap. But that does damage to women that's very, very hard to undo. And it can take them a lifetime to undo that damage. And we set society on such a pattern where so many men, we'd never before in history had so many men at the same time leave to go to a war. We used to have the warrior class would go to war. Yeah. In the First and Second World War, we sent everybody off to war. And so we had so few men, and the men that we had left were basically those sneaky fucker types. They were those ones that said, all those guys that went off to die for you, to protect you, because that's why they went, even if that was a trick, even if they were fooled into going to war, that's irrelevant. Their personal motivations were because they thought they were defending their families and their nations and their people. Those guys that went off to war to defend you, they're the real oppressors, and by the time the men came back, they came back to women who didn't need them anymore. And if the women didn't need them anymore, then what motivation is there for them to be ultra masculine? And if they're not going to be masculine, The women are going to continue to stay in their masculine frame in order to cover the gap. And so we have this cycle of just going downwards. And we pretty much hit rock bottom. And I don't think we could have turned this around until we hit rock bottom. I think that's an essential part of it, because everyone has to get to a point where they're so dissatisfied with these unnatural roles they're playing in society that they're willing to take on the pain of changing it, because that's less than the pain of continuing in the current situation. And that's basically where we are right now. We've hit rock bottom. We're facing it right now. I think real rock bottom was men in the women's bathroom issues. I think women are finally starting to come around to go, wait a minute, this is wrong. First female general was a 4-star general issues. These kind of things where women go, wait a minute, we've been fighting for rights for women, and now men are taking those rights. They're actually occupying the positions that we tried to shame you into giving us in the first place. And so I think we're about at a point now where women are starting to say, all these things we've been doing to try to make ourselves happy aren't working. They're getting ready. At the same time, there is a strong group of masculine men out there promoting men taking personal responsibility and taking responsibility for their community, which is what patriarchy is. Personal responsibility is for young men. Leadership is for men as you start to mature. It is a responsibility. Just like you have the responsibility to look after yourself when you're young, you have the responsibility to look after your community as you get older. And now that is your community. That is not the entire world. That is not people that hate you. That is people who align with you in your community, who are essentially your family, your extended family in the community. And that is something that we're starting to see people talking about that. We're starting to see that happen. I know communities in the US where groups of men have moved to those communities. They have taken over the local political establishment. They've gotten their own people in power. They get them in as sheriffs. They get them in as deputies later. The younger men as deputies, the older men as sheriffs, the older men as mayors, taking over the school boards. Even in countries where you can't take a police position due to election, you can still take over the local school boards. You can take over local city council. You can take over, if you're in a big city, you can take over the bar or the neighborhood councils. These are things that men can do, but it requires us to apply the same organizational principles that men did to make their big companies, to get wealthy, to broaden their social network. And really a lot of this starts with pulling in these lost boys that are the result of this mixed up society, and helping them to reach their potential, mentoring them towards their potential, and creating for ourselves essentially an army. Each man creating for himself a little tribe, a little army, and then using that to restabilize society. There's a pretty popular meme going around right now that warlords is the way forward, and the concept is very sound. Whether we get to a point where it's traditional warlords, where it's done through violence, or whether we're at the point where it's simply a matter of using that principle to organize men together to accomplish tasks or goals which are mutually beneficial. That concept of having a man who has unusual competency organizing more ordinary men, this is extremely important. And this is, I think, every man who's over the age of 30, especially if you're over the age of 40, you need to be figuring out who you're going to mentor. You should be mentoring at least one young man. And I think if you're retired, I don't think there should be retirement for men. Just because you're 65 or in some countries 55 doesn't mean that you need to drop out of society. That was a boomer thing. Let's drop out of society as soon as we could. We started working at 30 and we'll retire at 55, and we'll just borrow all the money we need from the future from our kids. But for us, for men our age, there will be no retirement. We may shift from money making to power making jobs. You are out there, if you're out there mentoring young men, organizing groups, creating a structure under you, this is not a charity. You're creating a power structure on which you are the leader of that power structure. And ideally, you will create it in such a way that even if something happens to you, it can continue to carry on your mission. And for men, this is our obligation. The Greeks recognized this, and the Romans recognized this, that successful men had an obligation to use their finances and their skill sets to benefit the commons. And so in Greece, the most honorable men were those who sacrificed for their community. That might have meant fighting in a war. If you were younger, that was probably the only way you could do it. If you were older, it was your obligation to get involved in the local politics and local community and running the local community and donating to public works, these type of things. Today, we don't have a lot of public works that are done through charity, but we have a responsibility to step up as men.
Yeah, I agree. A few things that worry me about the state of this, you can pull all these levers in society by how you allocate status. And so once again, in the past, if a man got married, he got status. If he had a few kids, if he was married with a couple of kids and a house and a job, he could sit at the big boys table with all the other men, drink whiskey and talk politics. But until that, you were a boy. And same with women. They didn't have status but in the same way or for that if they didn't have kids. But now that's completely reversed. And so now it's actually more, I don't think so, according to my obviously personal values, but I think in society is reinforcing this idea that for women to not have children, to be a career woman, that's what's high status now. And it takes a woman with a certain degree of disagreeableness to generate, or a strong family, or a strong male or strong family influence to actually go against the grain like that. And it's a real shame. But another thing too that Kurt has been saying is, conservatives now fail because they don't organize. Because every man, so many masculine men, they all have this dominance instinct where they say, I will cooperate as long as I get to be the top and under my terms. I'm the king. And the problem is you've got nobodies insisting that they're the king. You've got people who are not even that bright. They work for other people and they still won't listen to you because of this stupid dominance instinct. And, I think probably a big part of it comes down to the internet and social media. Another point that Kurt made is that dating between men and women has been obliterated by social media because it's just messed up everyone's expectations. You look at the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon, you get the average bookie girl on the girl next door, plain lovely, but, nothing that a million other women aren't kind of girl. But the fantasy that's sold to her is, he doesn't just have a six-pack. He doesn't just part-time model for Bond's underwear. He's not a millionaire because millionaires so 20 years ago. He has to be a billionaire now, but not even a billionaire that works. He's a billionaire that doesn't even work. He's a passive billionaire. But on top of all of that, his status signaling goes to the next level by having some kinky fetish about dominance. So he's like ripped, model, billionaire, sexually dominant. It's just, you can't craft an exaggeration of maleness more than that. You know what I mean? And also taking it to ridiculous extremes. And in the same way, a lot of young men now, because they've just got, porn on their phones and all that sort of stuff, are like not interested in, this is the thing. How can you have all these guys that can't get a date? There's women everywhere. But I think a big part of what's going on is they don't want to date a woman that doesn't look like a porn star or doesn't act like it. And so
they also expect women, the act like it is even more important than the look like it.
I agree with that.
Guys will pretend a woman is better looking than she really is if she acts the way they want. And I talk to a lot of women about this. I help a lot of women with dating. And because right now for women, for guys, honestly, a couple of sessions about how to properly approach women, and you've got whatever you want because it's so easy. There's no competition. But for women, especially feminine women they want a relationship. I talked about this recently, difference between the marriage market and the sexual market. Women want a marriage. They want a relationship. They may not want to get married, but they want a long-term relationship. and they don't want to initiate that relationship because they don't want a relationship in which they're the man. So
No.
they have to be a little bit passive, but then they have dozens of men. I know lots of beautiful women on Twitter that get dozens of DMs that are literally just, hey, that's it. Or just sharing links with them.
They don't want to be the leader.
It's grade school level of game. It's terrible.
Yeah. And, it's a division of labor. Women don't want to lead everything because they will have kids and run a household and do all this stuff that takes up all of their brain space. Men and women are not equal. It's one of the most pernicious lies ever. We are compatible. We have a division of labor. A division of labor means I specialize in this, you specialize in that, and the sum of all those parts put together, the sum of both of us is going to be more efficient and get more done than if we're both trying to do everything. So women don't want to be the leader in the world. That's your job. And so when you can't approach a woman, you are showing I'm not a leader. She's not going to approach you because she doesn't want to start a relationship where she is the leader, because she's already going to have kids, and that is going to take every ounce of her mental energy. By the time she maintains her friend relationships, maintains her familial relationships, does something for herself, tries to exercise, maintains some small grip on creative or work projects just so that she doesn't get completely out of the market, and then has 2 or 3 kids, and then looks after you after a long, hard day and maybe cooks some food and cleans up a house. They're done. They don't have the space left to think about politics or the world or international relationships or global warming and all this bullshit. They are done. They're full. And the reciprocal for men, you just can't do everything. Nobody can do everything. So understand this. There is the division of labor. You need to be the leader. And if you can't approach her, you're saying, I'm not a leader. Therefore, she's not interested.
Yes. And what is it about a man that makes him not able to be a leader at that level? Not all men are going to be leaders of men. Some men will be followers. That's fine. But what is it that makes a man unable to even be able to lead a woman well enough to take if he's brave enough to reach out and DM her, why isn't he leading that relationship somewhere? Why isn't he saying, hey, let's have a video chat, let's have a date? It's immaturity.
It is immaturity. And look, I've got an interesting life arc. I grew up as someone who would be very low status, and now I think I've largely reversed that. I would toot my own horn, but look, I don't have a problem, but the thing I've got going for me is that I'm pretty intelligent. And so even though I started one place, I could systematically, that's what I do. I figure out how things work. Everyone's like, you're an overthinker. If you're watching this channel, you're probably an overthinker as well. You're very systematic. But the benefit is that if I put my mind to it, there's nothing that within 5 years I can't figure out how it generally works. And so I've been able to take myself through many different situations. And I can tell you there, you have to, I won't go there, but I'll just say that for myself, starting from a low status position and not really knowing what to do with women, it's like no father figure, no societal, no cultural institutions, no rites of passage, no teaching on how to do it. And you know what? Very, very importantly, no one ever came to me and said, don't worry about Facebook and Instagram and all these guys who are so feminine brained that they're so into themselves that the main thing on their mind is their melanotan, their clenbuterol cycle, and they spend 6 hours a day in the gym. That's a distraction. Even if women sleep with the guys like that, they get bored. They don't like that. At the end of the day, that is not what women want. They are much more practical than you think.
Yeah, women are very mercenary. They know what they need, and they know if I'm going to have kids, I need a man that's blah 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 blah.
Absolutely.
If you can fix things as a man, if you have a network with other men that fix things and do things and accomplish things, that's far more important than being in the top 1% for physical fitness.
Absolutely. But what I'm saying is as well, that no one came to me and said, you know what, you don't need to be any different. You just need to be the best. You need to cultivate what you already have and you have everything you need.
Yeah.
Men these days don't feel like that. I didn't feel like that, but I taught myself, and obviously I've spoken to you a lot, and a lot of men, great men, have helped me along, and I want to pass that down. But I have a lot of male friends. They just don't have the confidence because society and the allocation of status is so misallocated and reversed, and it's such a parody of what it should be. We live in clown world that men feel like they don't have value. And so if you don't have value, you're just approaching some goddess that you wish to have sex with,
No,
and
they feel unworthy.
yeah.
And they don't have trust in their own masculinity as well. I've gone out with young guys and met women, and I was there to help them basically. And they won't approach women. I was surprised guys won't approach women. I'm like, what's she gonna do? Punch you in the face? Like,
Yeah.
I could get me too. And I'm like, yeah, right. Do you know anyone who's been me too? No. Okay, you're gonna just get, you're gonna get old and lonely is what you're gonna get. And
Yeah.
I'll go up to women and I'll, like an opener is, I don't think women should be allowed to vote. And this will be like my opener, because I will pick the most extreme thing I possibly can to show that these young guys that you can say almost any bullshit if you're willing to approach a woman and you do it with like good intentions. You're not creepy, you're not weird. If you come up to them with good intentions and you're friendly and your posture is open and your chin's a little elevated and you're happy, and you come up to them, you can make almost any joke you want, say anything you want, and they're just happy that some guy approached them.
Yeah. Because get back to the original point, systematic versus empathetic brains. This is a crucial inroads we can use. Their reality is socially constructed. They don't think, they feel, they intuit. They take in social cues and get a feeling. And so you can say whatever you want, but if you're doing it with a smile and a relaxed look and you just chill, those social cues are going to override what you've said. I mean, this is the problem and the opportunity.
The consistent pattern I've noticed is as soon as, usually the first girl to agree with me is the most attractive girl in the group. And as soon as she agrees, almost all the others, except for the least attractive, she'll often be the stick out at the end, but almost all the others, it's like a cascade of agreement, and they all change their mind. And it happens within about 30 seconds. Yep. And I can see them go from a closed posture to a more open posture, and just, looking up like they're thinking. And I see that just like a cascade happen. If the attractive girl thinks that might be a good idea, maybe she's right. I better not. I want to be on the attractive girl team, so I'm going to agree with her. And that's why it'll filter all the way down to like the least attractive girl is the only one who will stick with the, disagreement.
Absolutely. And, once again, there's an opportunity in nature. I don't know if this is correct. This is just my feeling on it. But I imagine a scale of sexual dimorphism where in the middle, you have leftists and their feminine men and their masculine women. And then you go out, you stretch the poles of masculine and feminine. You get very masculine and very feminine women, or the other way around. Either way, it doesn't matter. But the more feminine, the hotter she is, the more feminine her brain probably is.
Yeah.
And the more she's going to appreciate that division of labor, the more she's going to look like a woman and want to act like a woman and think like a woman. So if you come in with, once again, benevolent, loving, relaxed, but, throw something out there like, you don't want to vote anyway, do you? They probably love it because part of their brain's like, yeah, I'm a girl. I'm a feminine woman. I want to go plant flowers and cook food and look after babies. That's what I want.
Yeah. And it's, the power of that is enormous. You are absolutely right. I do think that there is that kind of a scale. And I think we can, as an individual, you kind of know where you are on that scale. One of the other interesting things is it's very much like the positive and negative of electricity. I don't know if you know much about this, but the difference between the highly positive charge and the negative is the voltage that you get. So that's the power that's in that electrical battery. And so as you get more sexual dimorphism, you get more sexual energy as well. And this is why you'll see sparks between these people that are really on the outliers, whereas it's notorious. I mean, people are having less sex nowadays because they're less sexually dimorphic.
Absolutely.
We blame it on stuff like porn. I think that porn is the result, not necessarily the cause. The lack of sexual dimorphism is causing guys to not want to bother go out and find women, because the only women they can find, being an effeminate man, is a masculine woman who's not going to be attractive to them.
There's
And
that
so they go for porn instead.
I completely agree, because it's just a lazy orgasm.
Yep.
It's low effort. It's low effort. It's low reward. It's just going and getting a pie from the takeaway shop. It's nothing. Why cook
the junk food of sex?
Yeah, exactly. Why cook a beautiful meal and take time and prepare and relish the end result when you could just go get an ice cream or something? You know what I mean? But once again, there is an opportunity in nature. If you want to up your masculinity, lift heavy things and eat meat, and let the hormone of the gods, your natural testosterone, do the rest. Because women, once again, if you have a relaxed and loving and benevolent and kind demeanor, on top of a noticeable testosterone driven thirst, women can pick up on it, and their self-esteem is directly related to your thirst.
Yeah.
Beautiful women will feel more sexy because you are thirsty. And you can drive all of this by lifting weights and eating meat.
And in even that creates this cascade of changes psychologically as well. And one of the things that makes a huge difference for men is to start to trust their own masculinity. And I'll tell you something, you get under some big weights. You look at a weight when you start out and you go, man, I'll never be able to lift that. And 6 months to a year later, you're lifting it. That does things to your psychology. That you lift a weight above your head that if it falls on you will kill you, and you master that and you lift it up and down, you're literally facing potential death. Hopefully with a closed grip and not this. So you don't actually drop it on your face. But you are now exercising your power physically in a relatively small and controlled way. But the knock-on effect of that is that you start to trust yourself as a man. The next step, I think, after that is for men is to go and take some sort of a martial arts course. Go take boxing, jiu-jitsu, something like that, where you can now start to trust yourself facing other men. Because first you're facing nature. You're facing gravity, which is part of nature. Then you're facing other men. And then women, it's going to be easy after that. It's going to be an easy thing to do. And this, we talked earlier about lack of father figure. It really is the underfathered world. It's the underfathered girls that are extremely masculine in order to bridge that gap. It's the underfathered boys that never learned how to be masculine. And the solution to that is, yes, raise our own children correctly. But our children have to live in a world full of these underfathered people. And so the more young people, pick people that are actually going to progress with your mentorship. But when we mentor young people, when we mentor young men, and I think the focus for men should be on mentoring men. It can be a little dangerous mentoring underfathered, attractive women, especially when you're married. If you end up doing that, do it online. And if best though to stick to men generally. So you mentor a bunch of young men, and you mentor them to the point where you are the father figure in their life. What happens is your children are now growing up in the world. If enough men did that, imagine if every successful, mature man was to mentor one young man a year. We would process through all of the helpable, not everyone's going to be helpable, but all the helpable underfathered young men in about a decade.
Mm. Mm.
Maximum, it would take 15 years. And the change that would have to society, the knock-on effect of that is there'd be more masculine men around, which means women could chill out a bit, could retreat back into their feminine position where they are happier anyway. And we would end up with a society that was more balanced again. We would end up naturally restoring order to society. It requires more masculinity to do that in the part of men, and it requires women when women become masculine, they become poor quality men. It's not like they become as competent as a man at being a man. They become pale imitations of masculinity.
Yeah, they just
They actually become toxically masculine. Overly aggressive, overly bossy, overly opinionated, to the point where if a man was doing that, he'd get punched in the face. Can't punch a woman in the face, so she continues it. But that program of mentoring other young men, because don't forget the men you mentor, men I've mentored, which I only started mentoring 3-4 years ago, are now mentoring other young men. It creates a ripple out into society when you do that. And it is the only way. I do believe it's important that we pay attention as men to what's happening in politics, in business, and in other spheres that are masculine. But that's not going to solve the problems we have, because the problem we have is an underfathered society. Only fathering will fix the underfathered. No government solution can do that. No corporate solution can do it. We have to do it.
A couple of points I want to make too. I've seen this a lot when in business, often women in positions of authority and power, you can tell that they misunderstand the concept of leadership, because they bring their feminine mothering skills. Women have authority, unquestioned authority over children, but you have reciprocity between equals. And so when you put women in a position of power, they tend to project this authoritarianism. They don't lead a hierarchy, a strong hierarchy of reciprocal incentives. I think men do that better. This is just very general. Some, there's always exceptions to the rule.
Absolutely. And the reason is I think men understand, and this is especially true the farther north you go, both Northern Europeans and Northeast Asians. If you go far enough, and especially in the West, there was the culture of the king is allowed to exercise his rule because we support him. And this is especially true amongst the Germanic kings. They were all what you would call a petty king. They didn't have millions of subjects. They had maybe a few thousand. And if the king no longer serves the people, if he's become corrupt, if he's betrayed the people, whatever it is, we reserve the right to kill him and appoint a new king. And so our natural inclination would be that we must act in reciprocal ways because we rule a powerful people with high levels of agency, with their own sovereignty. And if they don't like what we're doing, we're not going to be around to do it anymore. If you look at a lot of the agreements of how loot was divided in the Germanic kingdoms, if you were a king, you got 2 shares. If you were an elite warrior, you got 1 share. He literally got twice as much. That's all he got, was twice as much what his elite warriors would get.
Not 100 or 1,000 times as much. And
exactly.
So look, I have people work for me, and in any interaction, I take a bird's eye view of everybody's interacting incentives. And I think to myself, I'm going to have a more stable hierarchy if I keep everyone happy. I don't want the people who work for me to have to defend themselves against me. I don't want them to be baited into a situation that they don't like or don't appreciate being in once they're there, because they didn't see something coming in the future. What I'm trying to say is I don't want them to end up unhappy. And I realize that I'll have a more stable hierarchy if I do that.
Yes, because you'll be able to trust them. You'll be able to trust them. They'll be able to trust you. It
Yeah,
creates a high trust culture within your business, within your company.
exactly. And that's what I create. And you know what? Just recently, some people that work for me said, we like working for you better than everyone else. And it was the biggest compliment I ever got, in that scenario, because I want people to be happy working for me. I'm still happy with, say, 2 shares versus 1. But like I said, all my generals are getting 1 share. I might get 2, but I'm working for that 2, and everybody's happy. And they know I'm working for 2. I've got higher agency, higher leadership, a bigger job load, and I take 2 shares. But I've worked for other people, and I wonder if I would have to say definitely women who will say, do this job, do that job. And they might say, we've got this money, it sounds great. And then the job evolves and the pay doesn't. And you find yourself in a situation of being very unhappy because they've baited you into a situation where they're taking advantage of you. And I get this feeling working for a lot of, I'll say women and feminine brained men as well. And once again, it gets back to whether you just lay all your cards out on the table and you be honest. What I find is you have to defend yourself from being baited into a situation of being exploited, because they don't see a bird's eye view. They don't see your incentives as clearly as they see their own. They're more solipsistic.
Well,
And
a
I
woman's natural tendency is to grab every resource that she can so she can have more children. Because
Absolutely.
historically, women had as many children as they could feed.
Absolutely.
So whatever resources they could get were going to be spent on children at some point. Anything they give up means one of their kids goes hungry. And that the women who were not particularly materialistic, they didn't have many children to survive.
Yeah. And so,
The
but they
women who
don't.
were materialistic had more children. And so it was
Yeah.
bred into women. Whereas with men, we understood that honor principle, as you were mentioning, we understood that it's extremely important for stability, for
Yeah.
trust, that we
Yeah.
have a fairly flat organization as far as division of bounty from our projects. And
Yeah.
it's what allowed us to do so well in the West, is that even men of mediocre talent knew if they were loyal and they were honest and they picked a good leader, that they would be able to be successful and they'd be able to have a life. Whereas if you look in other cultures, the top 10% of men had all the children, and 90% of men were either cannon fodder or slaves. And we were able to be successful because we incentivized the majority of men to be productive.
We're men. You can't stride off into a battle and not be able to trust that the guy behind you isn't going to be a coward and run off.
Yeah.
Leave your back exposed, But like you said, women's instinct, it is more selfish, I'll just say, or they don't intuit reciprocity as commonly. It's not as common for women in positions of authority to intuit reciprocity between sovereign individuals, because they don't think they see you as a sovereign individual. They see other people as children.
Yes. And even then, I have seen many women, and it goes the other way too, where I've seen the women not even with their own children be reciprocal. So they give everything to the children to the point where they completely neglect themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so this is like when we say that women are massive resource sponges, just sucking all the resources, we're not saying necessarily, there are some women who are doing it selfishly, but it's not necessarily about selfishness. It really is about how many kids they can have in their mind, even if they're not really thinking about children, because this is instinctual. And I've seen lots of women. I've had to give advice to women about, you got to have to pay attention to yourself a little bit. Your kids will live if you go out and, get your hair done once in a while or go to a day spa. Your kids aren't going to die, and they need you to take care of yourself. But that reciprocity is very difficult for women to think, because women are usually all in until they're not. They're all in
their children.
Yeah.
And it even takes the dad to come in and say, hey, you got to let the kid grow into an individual as well. Just, break that bond a little bit, let it grow. You don't keep infantilizing the children. But I don't want to dump on women either, but we have this problem too with men now, because whilst women might not intuit reciprocity as much, I was going to make the point about social media, how it's skewed and screwed people's perceptions of the dating market. But I think it's also skewed young men's dominance instincts to the point where what is the business model of every social media platform is to sell fake high status celebrity to the average person. You have all these people who they're not celebrities, but they act like they're celebrities. Everyone cares what I had for lunch, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just one of these things where, you get these guys who can, watch like, rage porn, like on, dominance videos and like fighting and we're going to kill all the communists and all this like stuff and live in their head, and then, but they don't get into the real world, submit to the hierarchy, look at people who are doing better,
Well, they're dysfunctional.
They're dysfunctional
because they're unable to take their desire is dysfunctional because they're unable to do anything normal. A man shouldn't be thinking about how he's going to affect the world until he can at least administer his own life to a minimum level. That's why I said for young men, their responsibility is to get their own life in order. And for mature men is to get their communities in order. You have to pass through that stage of maturing to get to the point where your opinion even matters.
I know, but I don't think there's much incentive for men to realize that these days, because I think they're living in fantasy just as much as women.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's very, very hard. And I've seen this myself, like a few trusted people that I trust to talk with politics and philosophy and stuff. I've sent them something by Kurt. And to my credit, one thing I've never done is lie to myself. That's like my superpower is I'm not saying I don't, I'm sure I do, but I really, to the best of my ability, try not to lie to myself. And so when I find someone who's a lot smarter than me, I go, all right, I'm going to sit down and shut up. But there are a lot of people who really could use a bit of that, and they won't do it. They won't do it. They won't listen. They won't submit to a hierarchy even to save themselves. And so I think, and I just wonder, is that social media in the modern world selling you?
Well, and I think this is why, if you are going to mentor, go to the youngest men you can possibly mentor, like 16 to 21. Look at men in that age category to mentor. I have found great men to mentor in older ages as well. But I have a certain amount of exposure to a lot of people. And so if I can pick 1% of the people that I'm exposed to mentor, that still gives me a greater pool than your average man would have. But if you're an average guy, you'd be surprised. Like, you go to an 18-year-old guy and you say to him, I can help you get your life kickstarted, launched. I'm going to mentor you, but like, you got to listen to what I have to say or it's over. And you deliver some value pretty much right away. Most young guys are so hungry for any masculine, like, successful man to pay attention to them that they'll work for you for free. They'll jump back and forth and all over the place just to get that attention. And I think that's where you have to go, because most men over 30 have either made a success of their life or they never will. Yeah, there are exceptions. But that's usually where it is.
That's so true.
Oh, it's the same way as most women who are 30 are either married with kids or won't be. And then there are exceptions to that, of course. But basically, people get their life together in their 20s or they don't. And so if you're going to mentor men looking at the late teens, early 20s, that's a great place for older men to start building up a team. Plus, you have enough age difference. It's almost like having sons. Like, I have some of the men I've mentored, I look at them as sons. Like, I really feel like they're my children. Because it's gone. They're not clients anymore. I mentor them in a different way, in a different capacity. And it gets to a point where, like, so much about their life and you're such an integral part of that. And you help them so much that you now start to see them reciprocate just as your sons do to a father. You have that reciprocation. And it really is a very different thing than trying to make a coalition of your peers. If a successful man wants to make a coalition of his peers, he's never going to do it.
Mm.
Now, the one case in which he will start to do it is if he's created an army of young men and his peers go, how do I do that? And you go, get in line, get in my organization. I'll give you something to do.
That's
but
true.
you have to establish something that's so overwhelmingly socially positive, something that gives such proof that you're the real deal, that you can lead, that men are willing to humble themselves to follow you. And that isn't easy. That takes time, and that takes dedication. And you've got to have, a dozen young men following you to get that kind of proof to your peers.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we've had a great conversation, but I think it's about time that we wrap up. We've been going over an hour now. Was there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
A couple of things. Did we really stay on topic? It was a great conversation, but I'm worried we neglected the topic.
Well, the topic was men taking leadership in society, and we've talked about how a lot of women's dysfunction is due to the fact that they don't have strong men in society to lead them. And we talked about how it is the responsibility of men to first lead in their own life and then later lead in society, and what's happened when we didn't do that, and some practical suggestions on how to actually get to that point where you are leading. I posted on Twitter an excellent, very, very simple breakdown of how a man can essentially take over a small town, take over his local community. And it starts with building up that army of young men under you. And when you do that, you have an army of young, energetic men. You're going to be able to have an outsized influence in your community. It is real power. It is something you can't buy with money. And it is, for successful men, it is the ultimate investment. Nothing will bring them that level of return. And if the world descends into complete chaos, you are now the warlord of these young men, and this is your job to reestablish civilization in your area. One of the guys listening says he's in his late 30s. Guess he's screwed. No,
it's never too late, bro.
The one exception to that is autistic men are about 10 years delayed in everything. So, normies figure themselves out in their 20s, and autistic guys figure themselves out in their 30s.
That's definitely me. Yeah, that's definitely me.
There's a lot of men like that. Kurt always talks about that if you're autistic, you're not going to hit your peak until your 40s.
Yeah, but because what people intuit straight away, you have to understand systematically, but you have a deeper and much more comprehensive understanding if you put it together systematically than you just intuiting and kind of reacting emotionally to things, Well,
there's also very few resources for autistic people to learn that process of basically agency building, where you're then able to look at situations and very, very quickly adapt to reprogram your behavior to match what is necessary for thriving in a social environment. That takes a bit of time. And in fact, that's one of the things that I use the agency course for, is to train men and women to some extent as well. We don't have as many courses for women, but to train men how to really get that frame, that emotional control, emotional regulation, how to deconstruct what's going on around them in a way they can understand it very rapidly. Instead of taking 20 years to figure out this stuff, you got 12 weeks, and by the end of it all starts to make sense. And so I've been, talking to a lot of autistic people recently, especially a lot of men who are brilliant, financially successful, haven't been able to be as socially successful as they like. And it's really that agency building that's going to help them to get what they want.
If we've got time, I'd love to make one point and then wrap up.
Go ahead, please.
So I think that social signaling is very, very important. And a little quick story. An ex-girlfriend of mine, we met another couple, and she said, we met this guy, and he was just, we'd only just met him anyway, he and his girlfriend. And she said, my girlfriend, such and such, she always wanted a guy like that. Anyway, so my ex-girlfriend, very, very feminine, she was like, a guy like that. And I'm like, what What do you mean a guy like that? You've just met him. But he was signaling in the way he dressed a certain way. There's a difference between a business suit, a cocktail suit, a blazer, and chinos. There's a difference between work boots, riding boots, business shoes, loafers, all these sort of things. There's difference where, playing with your freaking cufflinks. There's a difference between having a business suit in cufflinks, all these different things. But once again, there's such an opportunity there because their reality is socially constructed. You could literally get any popular medium, a movie, say, and go, who is the alpha character? What is he wearing? How is his hair? How is he groomed? And how does he act? And if you could copy that, half the people in the world will treat you like that alpha character. That's exactly what my ex-girlfriend did. She went, this guy was dressed in some rip-off expensive designer clothes, so she treated him like he was a guy like that with money and status because he just put it together. He's
able to fake it. And if you want to test this out very cheaply, try this. If you don't wear glasses, get a pair of fake ones, put them on, get a white doctor-style coat and an ID badge, and walk around in a major metropolitan area and see how people treat you.
Mm-hmm.
It's about $25 worth of equipment there, and you'll go around. People, I did this because it was a costume for a. I didn't have a big beard back then. I had no beard. It was a costume for a kids event that we were doing, and I was dressed like this, and people were opening the doors. Old ladies were like giving me the "you can pass it, I'll get out of your way" sign. And, normally I'm like the door holder opener and I'm like letting the old ladies go by on the narrow street and stuff like this, because it's polite to take care of the elderly. And no, everyone was treating me with a level of deference that was ridiculous. Now, I understand why that goes to doctors' heads.
Mm-hmm.
So if it works that good by throwing on a coat, imagine what happens when you put on 20 pounds of muscle.
Mm-hmm.
When you just stand like a man with your chin up and your chest out, and you take deep breaths, and when women look at you, you look at them in the eye and you smile.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have to approach people anymore. I look at them, I smile, they approach me.
Mm-hmm. Or watch a James Bond movie. Go get the exact same haircut, buy a Chinese knockoff of the same suit, and go get yourself a cheap briefcase and walk around town and see what happens.
Yep.
Like their reality is socially constructed. So that is a huge opportunity when you think about it. And so my closing statement is, obviously, we are pretty heavily in the middle of a societal decline. Ask yourself when you've seen a movie that was worth watching, any music that came out that was any good. Nothing. We're not creating anything. People are selfish. They don't care about anything but themselves. Like in the mainstream, everyone's vain. We're in the midst of a societal decline. And so the title of the podcast is Men Taking Leadership. You have to, because no one else is going to. No one else is going to come and save you. We quite possibly are staring down the barrel of a new dark age, with the only people capable of reversing it being the ones being attacked. There's no one going to come and save us. So you have to do something. And I think in a sense, the postmodernists were right. It is about power. You need to pursue power so that you can uphold the good, the true, and the beautiful. The enemy pursues power so that they can tear it all down and invert all those values. But you also need power to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. Now, you can use your signaling to get social power. You can use the market to get business power. You can do it, the mentoring thing that Noah was talking about, to have social and like human resource power and political power and all these things, but at the end of the day, you have to do something. Kurt said today, what most people want out of YouTube is therapy. They want mindfulness. They have anxiety. They feel crap about life. And so they want to hear people talk about it so that you can be temporarily injected with a little bit of feel good. Here's some therapy, talk about it. Yeah, let's go with that issues. I feel fine, cool. I can get on with my day. But if that's all you ever do, nothing's ever going to change. And it's going to get worse. Talking about, getting boomers to take responsibility for anything is like nailing shit to a wall. I know so many boomers. You talk about politics. So I'll even approach them, say, you've been around a long time and you've got money. And they say, you know what? A lot of these things just work themselves out. Like, cool. So you're telling me you don't want to do anything, you don't care. I actually know another boomer, and and I said to him, he's very wealthy. And I said, don't you worry about where society's going. It's like, you know what? If anything really bad happened, I'll just get on my boat and sail away. Verbatim. So,
and there is some truth in that, because as the boomers die off, things will start to work themselves out again. Because those who have done, the counter reaction to boomer passivism is going to be an extreme level of assertiveness on men our age and down. And we're the ones that have to light that fire of assertiveness.
Yeah, but you have to do things. You have to do things. We're not here just to talk about it endlessly and feel better for the day and then come back again tomorrow, And there are a lot of people who are making businesses out of that. That's fine. Well, I don't think it's fine. What I want people to do is start thinking, how can I have power? We can revisit this conversation a lot. You get social power, political power, financial power. You need to do stuff because men need to start stepping up.
Well, power is the ultimate masculine trait. Power is the ultimate masculine trait. We talk about strength and we talk about courage and we talk about mastery and these kind of things, but really power is the ultimate masculine trait. It is what you get when you display masculinity to a very high level, including that leadership role. We are done with passive men. Passive men are going to go extinct over time. You're going to end up in a position where if you're a passive man, you'll end up in slavery. And if you're an active man, you're going to end up as a sovereign. And we're going to see that dichotomy. We're already seeing society split, and it's splitting between the men who choose sovereignty and the men who choose slavery. And that will be the future. And if you aren't collecting power to yourself now, you're going to end up on the slave side. And if you're a young man, go and look for these men that are collecting young men to themselves, training them and mentoring them, and get on board. Humble yourself enough to go and learn from them. Don't let them completely consume you. You have to continue to have your own personality and your own goals, but cooperate with these men and learn what you can from them. And, at some point, you're going to be the one collecting power to you. And these networks of powerful men are what stabilizes society. Thank you very much, Western Renaissance, for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. And if you're watching, please like and subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.